Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome in. As you're joining us today, I'd love if you can drop in the chat where you're calling in from so we can say hello. Welcome all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our global community. Hi from Brooklyn, from the New Orleans airport. Love that. From Coventry, from Virginia, Brighton, Fredericksburg, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Virginia's really showing out today. Ireland. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you. If you're joining us for the first time, thanks for being here for the Remake Community Call. Remake is a nonprofit advocacy organization fighting for human rights and climate justice, and we're really grateful to be in community with you all today. Before we get started, I've activated closed captions on the screen for the call, so if you need instructions for putting the closed captions on your screen, we will drop them in the chat for you. Hi for folks who are joining from California, from Brooklyn, from San Francisco. It's so good to see you here. As I said, welcome to our Remake Community Call. I'm dropping the instructions for turning on closed captions in the chat right now. And please, as you're just getting settled and welcoming yourself to Zoom, drop where you're dialing in from so we can say hello. But we have a very full and exciting call for you today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I am going to call up a couple of my colleagues, Alexa and Holly, who are here with an advocacy update for you all.
Thanks, Sam. So to kick things off, we'd like to lift up and celebrate a huge win for our community and colleagues. Last month, Levi's finally signed the international accord, joining the Life-Saving Workplace Health and Safety Program in Pakistan, where more than 574,000 workers will now be protected at over 500 factories. So this win comes after multiple years of persistent campaigning and signifies a long-awaited commitment by Levi's to protect their workers and contribute to a safer, more reliable fashion industry. To recap, the Pakistan Accord builds on the success of the original Bangladesh Accord, which was established in the aftermath of the devastating Rana Plaza factory collapse in 2013. Many US and European brands operating in this factory came under fire for their inaction, as the disaster highlighted the major gap in brand accountability for protecting the very workers who make their products. So today, with brands like Gap, Levi's, and 245 others signed to the accord, we're really witnessing a much-needed shift toward shared responsibility for workplace health and safety across the supply chain. And this is really an acknowledgement that when brands, suppliers, garment workers, and activists lock arms, positive change isn't only possible, but inevitable. So a big round of applause and thank you from Remake, our labor partners, and our fellow advocacy organizations, to all who've participated in our actions over the years and who continue to lift up the Accord as a beacon of progress. And just a reminder, you can always check in on our campaigns page for more updates as we continue to call on more brands sourcing in Bangladesh and Pakistan to sign the Accord. And I'll drop a link in the chat. And now I'll pass it to my colleague Holly to look back at our community's past actions and organizing efforts leading up to this victory.
Thank you, Alexa. I love seeing these photos. This campaign was my first time taking action on the ground for Levi's in New York City. We are so proud of each and every one of our changemakers who have been taking part in this campaign for over 2 years. If you are here on this call today and participated in any of these Levi's actions, whether virtually or in person, tell us in the chat. We want to see you and celebrate you. And feel free to tag anyone who inspired you over the course of this movement. Throughout this long push for justice, you, Remake Changemakers, have locked arms with workers and sent over 2,000 emails to Levi's executives demanding action. You have organized over 30 live actions at Levi's stores across the globe. You have helped garner nearly 70,000 petition signatures. You've posted, reposted, tweeted, commented, all to result in this successful push for systemic change across the industry. This brand signing is a reminder that sustained collective activism works. And when garment workers, advocates, and brands come together, we can create a fashion industry that prioritizes safety and its workers. Thank you for growing the presence of our changemaker movement and for holding brands accountable to do the right thing. This month, we are celebrating all of you, our ambassadors that campaigned for Levi's. It is the honor of a lifetime to get to move these kinds of mountains with folks like you. Let's keep it going. Let's continue making history together. Oh, Em, you're on mute.
Together, we can make such an incredible impact when we fight to hold large fashion companies accountable. As we just heard today, Levi's move to sign the Pakistan Accord is a testament to persistent campaigning and collective efforts to call for this very meaningful step. But of course, our fight is not over. And let's make Amazon, a $1.9 trillion company and the largest apparel retailer in the world, the next to step up and protect their workers worldwide. On today's panel, you're going to hear more about how we are uniting to demand Amazon meet labor's demands for worker safety, sign the international accord, and commit to incorporating climate adaptation measures. Before we welcome our panelists to the stage, we have an exciting announcement to share. Remake is very proud to partner on Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy, a new Netflix documentary that's premiering on November 20th that uncovers how fast fashion giants manipulate consumers into overbuying while exploiting labor and causing environmental destruction. This film dives deep into the toxic practices that are driving this massive industry, exposing the system behind the shopping frenzy. To tee up today's conversation, let's roll the Taylor tape.
Buying new stuff feels great, right? The problem is that every year we're consuming more, producing more, and there's a flip side to that that no one wants you to see.
I was president of the Adidas brand.
I started at Apple.
I worked at Amazon for 15 years. It's a highly refined science to get you to buy stuff.
They know you. Like, we know you.
We were constantly developing new ways to get you to buy. Influencing your behavior in subtle ways that you'd never even realize. And every trick in the book is being used to hide what's really going on.
Look at this bag. They're doing what marketers always do, which is showing you the shiny little thing over here.
By Gucci.
Because they don't want you to look at what they're doing over here.
This is what they do with unwanted merchandise.
Amazon was dumping into landfills toys.
The voices of we're going to protect the business win out over the little voice in your head saying, should we really be doing this?
These things are hazardous waste. We're drinking them, breathing them, and they're poison.
It just becomes this cycle of pain that may be providing you and your family with a lovely lifestyle. But you have to still reconcile that with things that are important to you as a human being.
Everybody wants to believe that the company that they're working for is not evil.
We can decide that this is not the way that we want to live and move it in a different direction.
Every industry needs to stop putting it on the consumer. Stop making it our responsibility. It's yours.
Life is about experiences and the people that we're with, and the stuff that we have supports it, but it's not the end. Whoever dies with the most stuff does not win.
Thank you, Allison. We're so excited for you all to see this documentary when it comes out in just a few short weeks. Perfect timing with Black Friday right around the corner. And today's panelists are really going to help bring this conversation to life for all of us. As I'm welcoming the panelists to the stage, we'll drop their bios in the chat so you can learn a little bit more about them. But today we're going to start with Caroline. Caroline, as the trailer for Buy Now so aptly puts it, corporate greed impacts us all. As these companies use marketing tactics, every single trick in the book to push us to buy. You are a psychologist. Can you enlighten us as to how the fashion industry uses cognitive psychology to manipulate consumer behavior? How does fashion so effectively use that shiny thing over there, like they talked about in the trailer, to distract us from what it is they don't want us to see?
Oh, well, where do I start? So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to contribute. Yeah, I'm super excited to be part of this. So some of the tactics that they use are subconscious, so we don't even know that we're being targeted. So, for example, they use cognitive biases that we all have, but we all fall foul of, such as anchoring. So by showing us a product that is advertised or shown online as at a higher price, and then we see it slashed 20% off, 50% off, and we believe, oh, that's such a bargain, we must have it. Another cognitive bias is framing, where we're shown pictures or music or something that gets us in the mood that we feel we must have this. This is such a desirable product. Brands also use scarcity. I think everybody's seen this. Only 2 left, only 1 left. Last week, closing down sale, all these kind of things. And then, of course, increasingly, brands are using social proof. So social proof is a concept which describes how influential it is when we see other people are doing it, other people are buying it, other people have this product. Therefore, it must be good, it must do them good, it must be a good product to buy, to have, therefore I must have it. So social proof is super powerful. And because we're all online all the time, on social media platforms, the element of social proof is so vibrant and so dynamic and omnipresent. And then we see, particularly quite often on Amazon and other brands, this idea of buy this and get one free, or buy 2, the third one half price, and you only ever really want or need one, but you're so tempted to get more because of the free offers, or a free gift. At the moment, in the UK, there is a store that's selling stuff ready for Christmas. There's a beauty box that costs £50 that if you spend £35, you can buy on top of that the beauty box for £50. And then they tell you that beauty box, if you bought everything separately, will cost you 300 and something pounds. So that tactic of getting you to believe you're actually saving money is a very smart tactic to get you to buy more. And then, of course, personalization. The adverts that come to you because you give away your data so much. We give away so much about ourselves that the brands know who we are, exactly like the guy said in the video. We know you, and they absolutely do, through all the data trail that we leave, not only with every product we buy with the brand, but also because brands sell your data so that and buy data. Of course, we have celebrity figures endorsing. I'm doing inverted commas here because are the endorsements genuine or are they paid for? You know, we have to be quite skeptical about what we're seeing before we buy. And then they also use FOMO, you know, this fear of missing out. If I don't have it, I'm not going to be part of this group, or it's not going to make my life better. So all these aspects, and I'm sure there are several more.
Like you said, where to even begin? It's every trick, every trick in the book. And, you know, folks in the comments talking about the Black Friday sales emails that are already coming in. So that's really why we wanted to ground this conversation here today, because we wanted to remind you that there's a lot of smart marketing messaging that is really manipulating these kinds of behaviors, and we can be on the defense about it. Thank you so much. Dara, I want to welcome you to the stage today. You have spent your whole career fighting corporate greed to improve both the climate and social impacts of global supply chains, including acting as a whistleblower on sweatshop conditions at Nike in the 1990s, which I'm hoping you can share a little bit more about with our community on today's call. For so many decades, voluntary corporate social responsibility efforts have really been no match for the scale of this growing fashion problem, which has just exploded exponentially over the last few decades with players like Shein and Temu and of course Amazon, blowing through historical overproduction figures. I would love to hear from you what knowledge and tools you think that activists, concerned citizens have at their disposal today that might make it so that we can hold companies accountable for their impacts. Tools that maybe we didn't have 30 years ago in this space. Maybe shine some hopeful light on us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Also, thank you so much. I'm really honored to join you all. I'm a huge fan of Aisha and Remake, and I'm really excited to learn from you all on where the movement is going and your amazing successes. Um, the the calling back to the 1990s, Aisha, you're making me feel really old. But yeah, so if you'll indulge me for some nostalgia for a moment here. So yeah, I've been working for like 30 years trying to figure out how to hold these firms accountable. And back in the mid 90s, it was very different. So the campaign you mentioned, I had to spend 6 months inside Vietnam doing research inside factories with amazing groups there, and then came back and partnered with Corporate Watch, Global Exchange, a bunch of groups here, wrote a report, flew to New York City, hand delivered it to Steve Greenhouse of the New York Times, then flew to DC, hand delivered it, and then got a story in the New York Times. This was like months of work to get one story written. And really, I think we got lucky because Nike then did this crazy campaign against us, which bumped it to the front page of the New York Times. But the strategy was really slow and painful. There was very low awareness, which is, I'm going to get to the hopeful part in a second of you all in this generation. But the thing that has remained constant is these brand campaigns still are quite effective in getting the attention of these reputationally sensitive brands. Still, 30 years later, this is one of the few weapons we have. And these huge, very large, very powerful firms are still very concerned about their brand reputation, particularly for this next generation of consumers. So fast forward today, much easier to gather information on conditions around factories around the world. Every worker has a cell phone with a camera. Much easier to spread that information. You can go direct to consumers. You don't have to go through the New York Times as your gatekeeper. And you all have learned that much of this is not about facts or science or data. It's about narrative change. It's about convincing this generation who is already much more aware, much more skeptical of corporate power and greed. Gen Z thinks about climate change, sees Valencia last week, understands human rights, thinks about these things, and cares and wants to shop aligned with their values. This is something that really has been a huge progress in the movement, despite continued violations of worker rights everywhere around the world, continued violations of wages and hours and these issues. We have seen this next generation really caring. And again, I am so excited. The Levi's campaign that you won, that was years and years of work to get a brand to finally flip. The Pay Up campaign, amazing. SB62, amazing. You all have made progress. So I know in it every day it feels slow and painful, but like for an old guy like me watching it over time, things are getting better. Now, like the thing from 30 years ago, people were surprised by an expose that Nike was running factories with sweatshops, and we were the first people to get inside and show pictures. People are not as surprised by it anymore. They're overwhelmed. Like just another expose doesn't do it. So it really is, we got to figure out what resonates with people. How do we connect with them in new ways? I have no idea why floating island of garbage was the one thing among all the racism and misogyny and xenophobia. That was this one thing that somehow broke through last week, just the noise. And so it really is, I don't know what things are going to work, right? And this is kind of one of the themes, and I'll stop, is that we don't really know the one right strategy. And so it really is us building long-term coalitions where we're trying a lot of different things: activism, worker organizing, better government regulation, better consumer campaigns, to figure out how do we go after both the reputationally sensitive brands like Amazon, which I want to talk about, but also the Temus and Sheins of the world that aren't as easy to target for their reputation. And we do have to figure out new strategies for going after their weaknesses in their global supply chains and in what can drive them to change. And again, I think I can learn more from you all than I can tell you, but I'm excited to have that conversation.
You're such great points, though, that narrative change really does matter and that the narrative has shifted and we're going to continue to shift that narrative and that messaging is really important. I'm going to welcome next to the stage Garfield. We're here today, like we said, to talk about Amazon, the largest apparel retail in the world. Amazon is also a major creator of the climate crisis, and Amazon's own employees suffer at the hands of the climate emergency and their own factories and warehouses as they're forced to work in deadly temperatures without adequate workplace protections. We're dropping a story in the chat about experiences that workers at an Amazon warehouse in New Delhi faced this summer when temperatures soared to 50 degrees Celsius and 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Senator Bernie Sanders, chairman of the U.S. Senate Help Committee, has even released a report about how company data shows that almost half of all warehouse workers at Amazon suffered injuries during Prime Day week in 2019. And you can read that report, which we're dropping in the chat as well. Garfield, you are an organizer at Amazon's Coventry warehouse, and you're battling for union recognition, increased wages, and the right to negotiate over workplace conditions. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you and your fellow workers are facing, experiencing, and why you're pushing for this recognition?
Thank you for inviting me today. And what I've heard from the first two speakers really does bear out some of the things I will share with you regarding the consumer trend, how it's being driven by the market leader, Amazon, and the perspective of the worker, where we have to meet this trend in the e-commerce sector. Amazon have increased a pledge and a promise that the consumer will get their goods quicker. We've been seeing this over the last, from 2018 to current. That volume has gone through the roof where I work as one of the key, what we call an FC, a fulfillment center. We ship the goods to other centers who then disperse it to the customers. And there's only 2 or 3 of us in the country, so we do high volumes. And in my time that I've been there from 2018, we've set processing records year on year in Coventry. And how they gauge that is on the last Christmas Day week, they look at a target figure, and last year we achieved 1.6 million items that were processed on that given day leading up to Christmas. Now, if we go back to 2018, we'd probably have a target of 800,000, 900, not even touching a million. And to be quite honest, I think they were trying to push for 2 million, just that the building's capacity to deal with this increased volume is impossible. I mean, we overproduce that much stuff, they sometimes can't shift it out the building quick enough. And the way that we have to work now, the intensity of the condition is such that Amazon looks upon the cash cow profit mentality. If the box is moving, it's generating huge income. When it stops, for whatever reason, they deemed that it's losing their money. So the flow of boxes in the building is at a ferocious rate. I've heard Amazon classes industrial athletes based on the fact of the weight ratio and the frequency of lift on 15, 20 kilo items over a 5, 6, 9 hour day, ultimately results in the body breaking down and the musculoskeletal conditions. It's a common thing with Amazon that when you then go through this problem of your productivity falling, they can suddenly decide that you're due for a meeting. But because of the competitive nature that worker is pit against a worker to achieve a rate, the process is not fair, and you can be finding yourself in a detrimental position through no fault of your own, other than that you have a poor system of work that places the onus of blame upon the worker at every time. So what have we been doing in Coventry? We got together in 2022 of August, based on another insulting 50p offer on top of another 50p, and the fact people were then smarting from COVID when Amazon paid them £2 an hour for 6 weeks and took it off them, announcing record profits. Initially, when we started our action in Coventry, we only had around 50 or so members ad hoc, but over 39 days of action and campaigning through the strike waves, we managed at one point achieve 1,300 members in the building, which technically put us in the ascendancy for recognition. Alas, Amazon's great union tactics and wealth saw them flood the building to maximum capacity, that we have 3,086 people across the shift who sometimes can't find a station, And that's been going on for a year to make sure that they diluted the power of the membership, and it prevented us getting the recognition. Now, the recognition was for under a tense campaign of misinformation that I could not attend every meeting. So there's numerous meetings for the workers. The gist of it being is you got to sit down for once and get paid by Amazon at work. So a lot of people took it up, but then they had the propaganda machine of what you would lose. We lost the vote by less than, I think it was 0.7%. 28 members dithered on a game of chicken. We brought in enough of the new hires to support and understand what was important. So these have only worked a year or less. They came across. And also based on the number of weeks, I think it was 12 weeks, Amazon had head start. They said we were going to lose so much if the union come in. It did actually frighten people. So that's what happened regarding the recognition. The point, what's now gone on from what we're trying to do regarding change and the recognition got all the workers to actually speak as one voice and have a number of leaders articulating that voice in different languages. The common theme was paying conditions and the mistreatment. And we've been talking to Amazon for 4 to 5 years, and I swear to God, it's not me saying it, somebody else has been saying it, and they've never listened until, guess what? We decided to go on strike. Suddenly, we got Amazon's ears in a very perverse manner. So as long as it's not any money involved, they will listen. So example is, we now have a new floor in the building, and all of us are moaning. That's our pay rise that we're walking on. We didn't ask for a new floor. You decided to go and give us a new floor to shut us up. Other little silly things. It affects our work. You decided you don't like seeing stickers that we use to sticker a problem, but you don't work on the floor. You work in the office. So we have problems now related to the goods that we use to identify as a problem. So what I'm saying is there's no talk with us about what it is you would like. Here's what you're going to get. Be very happy. And I'll share this one with you because I know I don't have much time. Regarding listening, this year, Amazon used a quite strange tactic to say they weren't going to punish any workers for warnings for low productivity or production. So what that then led in the workforce was down tools from April. To give you an idea, we're still knocking out a target, right? But the workforce, half of it, I feel, was standing around for probably 3/4 of their shift until 2 weeks ago when Amazon decided enough was enough and we'll have a chat with it. But that was based on them saying, we won't give you a warning. So what they then did, we don't call it idle time. We now call it non-productive time. And that is, yeah, that is looked over a period of some weeks. So if you don't record what happened from 8 days ago, you're now being asked to explain what was going on. Personally, I'm a bit of a zealot, and I've learned from past experience, I keep a log. I've gone back to the log, not only as it is, because it's evidence that when they talk to me, you know what's going on. Here's my written evidence to support what I've said to you. So we've had the issue with Amazon trying to stop it. We managed to keep the members going. We've also been organising the workforce that we've got together an unofficial structure of reps, which Amazon now know they have to engage with on behalf of the workers. And what's really antagonised them, that we've been so good, but then Amazon is so stupid that we run rings around them about employment aspects when there's been clear breaches. So what they now do, they send it out to the ERC team, which I call the hatchet team, the more experienced case managers. And you're really at the mercy of when did you get the person to support at what stage? Because if they've lost their job, Amazon don't give the job back. And also the severity of what the action was, because disproportionately, Amazon does not use discrimination at the formal meeting. So members would actually be forced out of a job. And we discovered that some of our members go unrepresented, trusting Amazon after 1 year's service, they lose their job. The more experienced staff like myself know you get you a union rep to come with you, just to make sure things are done in a fair perspective. And what have we forced Amazon to do? Well, over that 2-year window, although they won't admit to it and they say it's a company pay review, we've managed to get all Amazon UK workers on tier 1 a pay increase, although it be 50p, the pay increase is such a good increase that we have to be careful that when we now talk to the media, we don't boast about the pay increase. But let me finish quickly with this one, if I don't get another point. We had shares when we first come to Amazon, 1 share or 2, called a restricted stock unit. They were worth about £2,000 if you left them there. We were forced to give them shares back based on we supposedly voted for this to have it put into our hourly rate. And some of us older hands have not forgotten the fact we had an opportunity to have some support or contribution to the company's wealth by that share offering, which they took away from us. So if I sum up for you quickly, what Amazon have been trying to do in the last couple of years, they have a high burnout rate policy, which they know that's how they operate globally. They don't want the staff who've been there long enough, like myself, to know what was what and the ways of working. And also because those of us who are more speakers of English, like myself, firsthand, we tend to stand our ground and don't put up with Amazon's rubbish. So what would we like to achieve? Have I got another quick minute to tell you a bit more about the achievements? Right. What we've done, we've created a number of groups via WhatsApp because communication's been the key for us. We learned at the very beginning, I don't say this belittling, right, but we had to explain to people what was a letterbox, how to post a letter back into the box, because in the UK it's done by a ballot. We lost our first vote by 3. We then realized we had to get it out by various languages. We have them translated. We have speakers that do videos into the mother tongue, and we put the message out. We do a peer-to-peer text servicing where we talk directly to the members, which we've been using this week, and we get a real-time response. And the question this week, we're doing a pay consultative ballot across the whole of the Amazon network in the UK. And by this, what I'm sharing with you here is we're trying to galvanize the workers to respond, that when we ask for their feedback and input via the survey, they need to tell us what we do in the future. So example, I've been asked, when do we strike? I said, the trouble with that, my friend, if only 230 members have voted for strike, what are the 700 doing or not doing that we have to tell managers that only a small percentage. So we're having to make sure the members understand that the surveys we ask for, you need to input back in there to give us your input so we go forward. Across the UK in itself, we haven't laid dormant here. We've done a media campaign, a political campaign, which I was part of with a motion to Keir Starmer. We now believe we're going to see a direct attack on the recognition process to make it fairer. The threshold, we go from 50% plus 1. We hope to around 40%. There may be consideration for electronic voting as a paper one, and the time frame to which the union is allowed in will be from immediately that it is decided the workforce want to unionize. So we believe from our strikes of 2 years and the media campaign that we've been galvanizing and spreading, also with major collaborations, which I haven't touched on with our European colleagues and American colleagues, that we've been sufficient pressure over a couple of years period, or that's been happening prior to us coming from Coventry, that we're forcing Amazon to take note and sit up. And we do believe they are becoming very weary of us, because the campaign under Make Amazon Pay is a vast campaign across the globe, and the GMB are supporting that, and myself, we're to go to Frankfurt this year to highlight a big petition in a German website to show from last year's solidarity message on the 24th of November, all workers are getting together in different sectors, especially Amazon workers, to challenge their working practices and to show other workers that they're not alone, and that we have a solidarity message that if we stand together, we can achieve.
Thank you so much for sharing with us what's happening on the ground. Remake's a proud campaign partner of Make Amazon Pay, and for our community, we'll be sharing more information about how they can get involved in those efforts. It's also so interesting to think about, and I think it brings us kind of back to some of the message that the documentary was sharing about how volume is really impacting this conversation and really changing the game. So thank you for sharing about that, and a little bit about the organizing that's going on the ground. Bringing it back to the Buy Now documentary, I'm going to welcome to the stage now Maren and Eliza. Maren's a familiar face from the trailer that we watched. You so aptly put the Buy Now story as this: sell more, waste more, lie more, exploit and extract. While you were working at Amazon, you publicly called on the company to better protect warehouse workers and reduce its impact on the climate emergency, going on to co-found the Amazon Employees for Climate Justice. Can you tell us a little bit more about what motivated you to speak up while you were working there and what happened?
Yeah, so great to be here. What a great panel. What a huge group. It just gives me hope hearing from all of you that we've already heard from, and so many people showing up here like that. And I think one of the themes we keep hearing is, it takes all of us together. You don't stand up, by yourself. So at Amazon, I had been there for quite a while, and I thought in some ways I was kind of making the world a better place, trying to make Amazon more inclusive or more accessible. but eventually my values and Amazon's, I just couldn't stay at the company and sort of maintain my own integrity. So I decided I either had to leave and just walk away and kind of have no impact, or stay and try to change the company for the better. And at first I was trying to, pitch ideas to senior vice presidents of how we could be more sustainable, how we could just be a better company, more ethical in general. But that, doesn't work. You realize you have no power by yourself. And that's when I found a small group of employees who had already spoken to the New York Times about, and Eliza is one of those people, and had written a shareholder resolution to pressure Amazon to have a climate pledge. At that point, they didn't even have a climate pledge. So I signed on to the shareholder resolution, and then we, submitted that, and then it kind of started the conversation. When tech workers, it's kind of unfair, but when tech workers do things, we get press easier, I think, because it's not very common that tech workers stand up and complain or anything, because we're, historically have been treated so much better than almost any other workers. And that's starting to change. Tech workers are starting to see that they are just workers like anyone else. And in a neoliberal capitalist and imperialist system, what happens to some of us is going to eventually happen to all of us. And so it's really, really, really in time for tech workers to start organizing and standing up with warehouse workers at Amazon and pressuring Amazon. And that's where the power comes from. So we started organizing. We got thousands of people to walk out for the global climate strike. Amazon was tolerating, to some extent, the climate advocacy. They announced their climate pledge, and that was a huge win. But then when COVID started and we wanted to organize with the warehouse workers to help bring the protections that they needed, they weren't getting, they didn't have PPE, personal protective stuff. They were, in order to get a day off, you had to take a COVID test, and you had to have a positive COVID test. And at that time, right at the beginning of COVID, it took a week to get a test and another week to get your results back. So people were going to work, when you might, missing a day, having an unpaid day of work could mean the difference between putting food on your table the next day. And so then somebody would disappear next to you on the line, and there was no transparency. You didn't know what happened. So these were the stories we were hearing. So we said, okay, let's let warehouse workers talk directly to tech workers, because, inside Amazon, to the tech workers and to the world, Amazon was saying, everything's perfect. It's going so well. Warehouse workers are our heroes. They're our frontline workers. We're doing everything, and everything's just perfect. And we thought, okay, well, hey, why don't we just let the warehouse workers actually tell their stories? So we sent out an email to a town hall. We had warehouse workers that were going to come together and speak with tech workers. And within 2 hours of that invitation going out, 1,500 tech workers had accepted the invitation to say, I want to come listen to warehouse workers speak. And within that same 2 hours, I and my colleague, Emily Cunningham, we were sort of the most visible people of Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, the group that we founded. We were fired, and Amazon pulled the invitation out of everybody's inbox and off of everybody's calendar. So obviously surveillance, shutting down a legally protected conversation, really, really terrified about tech workers and warehouse workers starting to work together. That was obviously what just flipped their bit. And so National Labor Relations Board here in the US took Amazon to court on our behalf, because that is protected communication. We don't have a ton of protections here in the US, but that is one of them. And we won. And therefore Amazon had to post internally everywhere, warehouses everywhere, that this type of communication is protected communication. So that was a huge win. And we're continuing to try to hold Amazon accountable. Obviously, the Buy Now film is an example of the just massive destruction and abuse and exploitation. This lifestyle of having something, whatever you want it, whenever you want it, is not sustainable. I mean, Amazon would not have a viable business model if they weren't able to exploit basically the entire global South. I'll stop there.
And this is a climate story too. Eliza, the Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, did a deep dive into Amazon's climate pledge, their sustainability plan, to examine how they're living up to that. So can you tell us a little bit more about what the report found and maybe what you think it's going to take for a major retailer like Amazon to address the scale and scope and urgency of the climate crisis?
Thanks so much for having me. And this is a really big question, so I'll try my best. And I'm so glad to see everyone here because really it will take all of us. And, we did this report and it's very long because, as you can imagine, Amazon is a big business, lots of different areas. And so we outline in this report all the different ways that Amazon's business is actually accelerating the climate crisis. You all might be familiar with Amazon's climate pledge, which, as Marin shared, we were able to, and Dara might also have some insight here, we were able, as workers, we were able to really push Amazon to make this commitment for the first time ever in its history. To reduce emissions. But what we found now, 5 years later, and what this report really outlines is, despite a lot of the public announcements that have happened in the past 5 years, and despite all the projects that Amazon has done in the sustainability space, what we've found is that Amazon's emissions are still increasing and are actually higher than they were 5 years ago. And there's a lot of different ways about this, right? And I know this, obviously you all know about fashion, and I'm sure some of y'all have seen the news. Amazon has recently announced that they're going to launch a business that's a Temu competitor, where they're trying to build a marketplace for ultra low price products, and because they see this market opportunity, and of course that is truly seems incompatible, right, with the supposed climate pledge. And what we have really found is that Amazon over the past 5 years has used this climate pledge as a PR shiny object to distract from the fact that its emissions are increasing. And not only are its emissions increasing, it's actually actively lobbying governments, lobbying third-party authenticators and verifiers to lower the standards for companies. So, as an example, recently this past summer, Amazon announced that it had reached a 100% renewable goal 7 years early. And what that means is they announced that 100% of their operations are now matched by renewable energy, 100%. But what the reality is that it is a creative accounting scheme, and it's relying heavily on what's called renewable energy certificates to basically make the claim on paper that it's using renewable energy when actually Amazon's energy use is expanding, not only expanding when I say expanding fossil fuel use, I mean literally delaying the retirement of coal plants and building new gas plants to power its operations. And all of this, is. And when I'm sure you all are very familiar with this, and Amazon spends a lot on PR to make sure that people see look at our solar panels, look at our wind farms. And while those are good projects, they're a drop in the bucket of what Amazon's overall footprint is. And if you can also imagine, I worked at Amazon for 6 years, and Amazon also subjects its own employees to a lot of PR. You go into the office, there's TVs and posters by all the elevators that if you go to the office, you have to walk by, you have to stare as you're going to your desk. And they're 24/7 blaring advertisements about Amazon sustainability. And we've really seen Amazon use sustainability as a marketing tactic to like hide from not just the climate impacts that we're talking about here, but all the worker impacts as well that Garfield talked about so well. You know, I grew up in Southern California in the Inland Empire, which is also a huge Amazon logistics hub, a very polluted area because of warehouses. And so what we're really seeing is, again, it's this kind of marketing tactic. And what we tried to lay out in our report was actually, here's the real story here. And something that we found that's definitely concerning, you know, Amazon has signed a bunch of kind of voluntary corporate commitments, which I'm sure you all are very familiar with. There's many of these, right? Which is actually great, right? Because there is no regulation right now for corporate emissions in the US. However, the really terrible part about this is that because these are voluntary commitments, there's no actual accountability to actually meet these things. There are some that do have a little bit more accountability. You might have seen the news that last year, the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is one of these voluntary commitments that's really trying to get corporations to use science to set their emission standards and not just make them up out of thin air. SBTI is what it's known as, and they actually dropped Amazon because Amazon was not able to sufficiently prove to them that they were actually meeting these science-based targets. But what we recently have uncovered too is that Amazon is quietly behind the scenes lobbying one of these standards called the GHG protocol. And what they're lobbying is to really get those standards to be as lax as possible to allow for things like what Amazon's currently doing, which is creative accounting and buying up certificates on paper while actually not reducing their fossil fuel dependence. And the really terrible thing about this, one of the terrible things about this is, as I mentioned, in the US, right, there's currently no regulation about corporate emissions. But the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, is considering putting into place some regulation around this. And SEC is basing their regulation off of the GHG protocol, which is this voluntary standard. So Amazon, you know, obviously is trying to lower those standards so that by the time it makes it into law, you know, hopefully those standards will be lower for it to continue polluting. So what can, you know, and obviously all of this, you know, probably isn't a surprise. And I think the other part of this conversation is really about power. You know, why are we making this report? Why are we trying to make these facts known? And while I agree about what folks have brought up around, you know, it's really important that we shift the narrative publicly. Ultimately, what that narrative shift is trying to do is shift power into people to make these companies actually accountable. And what we're working, you know, I'm part of Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, and as an example, you know, when I remember one of my roles was working in delivery, and one of the metrics that we had was around warehouse turnover. And it is exactly as Garfield said, right? My team, we knew at the time, this was a few years ago, at the time, we had a metric that was warehouse turnover, and it was 10% every month. So that means that every year, more than 100% of the warehouse turns over. What that means is more than 100% of the workers are no longer there. And that was just taken as like, oh, that's just the way it is. There's no way to change that. It's just always 10%. And that's because of the working conditions, right? And so, you know, as workers trying to work within the system of our company, like trying to change it, you really hit up against all these walls of this is just the way the business is. There's nothing you can do to change it. And so when we talk about power, we need to organize workers to speak out against the company, and that's what, in our experience, that has worked, and that has worked particularly well when workers' messaging is able to get out there and the public amplifies it. Civil groups amplify the message because workers know intimately well what the company is doing. And so, as Marin shared too, when you know, ultimately Marin and Emily were fired when we tried to work with warehouse workers because the company was truly threatened. And again, what Garfield said, right? The company didn't listen until the workers went on strike. And so, and, you know, I think regulation is important, but as I also outlined, you know, there's obviously risks with that because companies have a lot of lobbying power. I have so many other examples of Amazon using its lobbying power to kill climate or sustainability related like regulation. And so while regulation is important, legislation is important, those things are ultimately still affected by the company and take a really long time. And where regulation starts is by people who know the issue really well, being able to put solutions out there, which we also put in our research report. So when we talk about shift, like narrative shift and having these companies actually change, it's about holding these companies accountable with real power. And from our experience, that real power comes from organizing workers, like the tech workers, the corporate workers, and the warehouse workers. And that's really what we think is really needed. And for the public and for civil society groups to support worker organizing is also really important. So I'll pause there for now because I obviously can talk a long time about all this.
This is so great. And I think just a good way to kind of summarize what we've shared today is like that idea that you don't stand up by yourself, and that this is like a collective effort organizing for power, and it's going to take all of us. I want to do a quick, just like round robin question with our panel about advice. So we've got a group of next generation change makers on the call today who want to hold these big brands accountable and change the way that the fashion industry operates. What pieces of advice do you want to give them about how to make change? Maybe Caroline, we could come to you. How could they talk to people about these issues and make that narrative and power shift happen?
Sorry, I'm muted now. I think it's really important that people understand they're being manipulated and understand how emotional messaging, emotional narratives get to people very, very quickly before they know they're happening. So I absolutely applaud the speakers that have spoken on today's panel. Fantastic conversations and really powerful, and really getting to the emotion of becoming more active in fighting this situation that's damaging to everyone and the planet. Speakers, I think it was Garfield, mentioned about burnout. Burnout isn't just exhaustion. It's not just anxiety or stress. It's a finish of the person. It takes a long, long time to recover from burnout. And, days off, yoga days, all those kind of placating efforts that some companies don't really work, because the problems still exist when the people go back. So in terms of what companies can do, I think the people on the panel have been incredible and so active in getting the situation to change very slowly, and companies change very, very slowly. In terms of consumers who also have power, pause before buying, think twice, look at alternatives, look at what you've already got, turn off personalization, be careful not to share all your data so brands know more about you than you could possibly ever imagine. They target you with the things that they know you like. Think more carefully about when you're on social media, exposure to adverts and so on, these kind of things. But in the end, all of this is about using our cognitive abilities to change the mindsets, the process, to change the systems that are going on, in the companies. And, if anyone can get Amazon to change, I believe it's the people on the panel today. Have been absolutely incredible. I'm humbled to be on it with these fantastic people, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your advice. Dara, what about you? What advice would you give our community?
Yeah, just building on that, I think this really is a great group of people with deep expertise and thinking. I think, first, there's no silver bullets. There's no one answer here. There's multiple pressures. We need activism, worker organizing, smarter regulation, startup innovation, new models of sustainable apparel and fashion that many of you are bringing to this also. One message, though, is I think you really, really, really need to understand your opponent deeply and their core business practices. And Amazon actually is quite different than most retailers and most apparel companies. And Marin and Eliza and others know this well, but they historically really were customer obsessed. I think they've lost some of that, but they were obsessed with price, selection, convenience, reducing cognitive load, using the recommendation engine to get you to buy more. We really need to understand them and understand consumers as well as they understand consumers. I don't think they understand Gen Z and this emerging generation, but they have really, really been very good at understanding how to get us to click the buy button and to just buy more. They are not primarily focused on profits. They're not primarily focused even on cost reductions, but they're obsessed with Prime memberships. They're obsessed with sales growth. They're obsessed with now responding to Shein and Temu. How do they get into the ultra fast fashion game, get into the sales direct from Instagram or whatever? They're not really scared by NGOs. They're not really scared by workers. They're not even scared by governments. So we really have to understand, what are they scared for? Historically, they were afraid to lose Prime members. Now, interesting side quick thing, the Washington Post just lost 250,000 subscribers because of a really stupid move by Jeff Bezos. That should get their attention. I think that we need to think, what do they care about? What do they measure? What are their core metrics and mechanisms that drive their decisions? And how do we go after those? So I think we have to be really serious and really think about building a coalition that crosses all these areas and that is very targeted at what their actual weak points are in their global supply chains and what the leverage points over their decision-making are. And I don't think it is traditional activism or traditional regulation. We have to think quite creatively about how you try to influence a company as powerful and diverse as this.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Garfield, I'll come to you next. Oh, sorry, you're on mute. Here, I'll ask you to unmute.
That is really interesting. Amazon's matrix. I think the word I come across was Amazonification, which is the root system below the ground, which kind of gives you an idea how Amazon has spread in 20 years in the UK. It's well established. It reaches its milestones. Its milestones are frequent. They've managed to get that huge database, which I think is quite relevant. It's Prime customers. And the way they've done it is to lower their shipping costs and make it look better for the workers have to ship, so you get free payment. So they use that caveat to get their customers. I do believe what was mentioned about looking at ways to attack them. I like the fact of leaving feedback with Amazon because they may not be that customer obsessive. Their mantra was customer concentric, focus, and obsessive. The customer is king and queen. And we would like people to start leaving messages for them to make them feel uncomfortable. The one I like out is pay your workers more money. Things need to be said. They don't like publicity. So the more publicity that is brought to bear, the more it makes them uncomfortable. And what we've realized with Amazon, this is quite important as a key player, right? They have the concentration of wealth and power, and it means they have the ability to influence the worker's life globally. The competitors to catch up with Amazon will now need to follow suit. And what I didn't touch on was AI, which is a critical thing, which is really destroying us in the productivity race. Tracking and monitoring and surveilling, you have no rights. So what we've decided is by standing together, we've managed to get some rights to challenge Amazon. Our voices are now being heard where before they wasn't being heard. We also know that to improve workers' pay and conditions, we had to talk to each other so our voices could be heard. But also in that process, we're all fighting advocacy in a positive way for change, knowing that it's an ongoing fight, and we have to learn from our experiences and strive to make workers' voices heard and also work in collaboration with others. So I'm all for that collaboration, working partnership, and getting the voice out there to be heard by others so they understand and they can't say they don't know.
Thank you. And finally, I'll come to Mara and Eliza.
I really do agree that that worker power and workers standing together is probably, I mean, the most powerful force we have. It is insane the amount of power that is concentrating in the hands of these tech companies. Out of the top 10 billionaires in the world right now, 8 of them come out of big tech. AI, the AI arms race that everyone, that, you know, they're all just cutting any dead weight they can to invest more in AI. And that's going to further increase the economic inequality and remove worker power because workers are losing their jobs. So, but when we look, you know, historically at big, we need some radical systems change. And when we look historically at radical systems change, it most often comes about with, unfortunately, war and or mass collective action. So in the United States, we have, civil rights or even women's rights to vote or same-sex marriage. And these major systems changes come from building these coalitions and building the one-on-one relationships. And it's gonna take the 99.99% of us going up against this 0.01. It's just gonna take all of us, because it's really unprecedented power that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree with that. What I'll add is, Amazon obviously is a huge company globally, and it does absolutely pay attention to kind of reputational risks, whether when they come from workers or the public or governments. But because it is such a massive company, what I've seen in my time at Amazon is for kind of public campaigns to even make a blip, the scale that's needed, the number of customers, the number of mentions or hits is astronomical. And so, I mean, maybe that's not impossible. Maybe there is a mass movement that will actually get enough, millions. I'm talking in the millions of people to take action like this. But I do think that if there are more strategic ways and that what those strategic ways come to is actual organizing. I was really glad to see the photos of the Levi campaign of people actually being in the streets and to Garfield's point, people actually talking to each other. I think there is a lot of kind of online social media collectivism campaigns that while it adds to the critique, I think ultimately if we're talking about shifting power, it needs to go beyond that, and it needs to go to real people talking to people, and really the workers organizing and having that be in coalition and not be disparate campaigns, disparate efforts. These efforts have to be combined, and especially since workers, we know what are the real demands that would actually result in real change at the company, that would really, to Dara's point, shift the business and shift the business model. And so I would really urge folks to, continue the real in-person organizing and really amplify worker demands and work together with workers instead of being off in silos. But I'm really glad for all the work that folks are doing, and it's really great to see all the passion, and because that's what we do need.
Thank you, everyone. And everyone, if you can please give our wonderful panelists a warm remake thank you for being here. This was such an insightful and incredible discussion. We can't wait to keep the conversation going with you when the Buy Now film comes out. I'm going to now turn it out to my colleague, Tessa, who is going to bring us up to close. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Emily. I feel like I say this every month, but the community calls keep getting better. We keep having such incredible speakers here, and I'm just so deeply grateful to each of you for sharing your stories, your experiences, and the ways that we can all mobilize together to build this movement. As all of you said in different ways, which I think was so valuable to hear, this movement doesn't happen without every single one of us chipping in any way we can to move things forward and protect people and our planet as best we can. And so with that, I just wanted to start first of all by sharing who I am for anyone who doesn't know or how I haven't gotten the privilege of meeting here just yet. My name is Tessa Beltrano, and I'm Remake's Senior Development and Impact Manager at Remake. And so I get to support resourcing this incredible movement. And it's such a privilege to get to be on with you all and share a little bit about that work. And so I do have a very exciting announcement today, but before we get into that, I wanted to start very quickly, and thank you to anybody who's hanging on to listen here. I want to start really quickly with just 2 questions. And so as we all know at Remake, joy is core to this work and moving this movement forward. And as Dr. O'Rourke shared, these are long fights. We have incredible supporters here who understand the value of that resourcing of this work, such as the Miot Foundation, which some of that wonderful team is on today. Resourcing this work makes all the difference, but a lot of that has to happen. A lot of this movement has to grow if we all can maintain and protect our own well-being. And so first, I want to have a little fun question here. If anyone could drop in the chat, just what is a meal that brings you joy? Just a little fun kind of mindful question here. Anything you share, I love. If I'm cooking, maybe it's pasta, broccoli rabe. If I'm getting takeout, I completely agree, Kelsey. Indian food is my go-to. I'm going to get so hungry just looking at all these responses coming in. Thank you so much. These are just wonderful ways that we can all take care of ourselves, and nourish these fights as long as they are to take good care of ourselves. And with that, Oh my God, I love these kimchi pancakes. I'm coming to you. Our question number 2 here is, what is a remake memory? Just one memory or maybe one community member here who has brought you joy. That can be someone you showed up at a protest with. I'm so grateful that was mentioned here as something that really helps to move the needle. Maybe it's someone who you connected with across the world that you learned has a shared interest through our ambassador Slack. What's just one memory or individual here in this community that has brought you joy? Whether you just joined the community or you've been here since the very beginning over about 10 years ago now. Oh, I love these answers coming through. The clothing swaps, absolutely. They're such a good community building opportunity. Those are so important to refresh and connect with one another too, outside of keeping these beautiful clothes out of landfills. Oh, thank you very much, Sammy. Very sweet. I love seeing Aisha. Absolutely. What an incredible leader to this movement who has founded this work. Oh my goodness, these workshops, this is incredible. And Rebecca, absolutely. Fighting alongside our garment worker partners is one of the greatest privileges. I completely agree. That's why we do this work. Thank you so much all for sharing that. And so you'll see how these connect in a moment. I know these might seem like disparate questions for a second, but I'm so grateful to hear all the bits and pieces of whether it's a meal or a person or a remake memory that has kept you going throughout this year, throughout your time at Remake so far. And with that being said, now it's time for our big announcement. Thank you so much, Allison. Our announcement is that we have officially launched Remake's Give Your Values Matching Challenge. This is one of the greatest privileges and opportunities to help power this beautiful movement. These community calls don't happen without all the resourcing that goes into supporting this beautiful team that brings in these incredible speakers, brings in and fosters these wonderful campaigns that we know are vetted by our worker partners and escalated by them and their voices across the world, from South Asia to California and everywhere in between and outside of there. And so this matching challenge this year has a 100K goal. So we have $100,000 to reach by the end of this year. That'll be December 31st. And any donation amount is so helpful in powering this movement. So I'm going to drop in the link here to donate. If you have the ability to support, maybe it is the value of that comfort meal or that beautiful snack that you love so much. Maybe it's the dark chocolate or the kimchi pancakes. If you have any amount that you're willing to share to support, that will go such a long way towards reaching our goal. We are already at $13,000 towards our 100K goal. And I think you all know this is such a grassroots movement. Anyone who's hit the streets with us, who's run a clothing swap, who's helped us organize beautiful community events or educating their peers through social media, every step that you've taken is such an incredible and invaluable step towards building this force of making fashion a force for good. And now is the time, really, as we enter the holiday season, if you have friends, family reaching out saying, I don't know what to give you, and I'm sure maybe many of you have experienced the, I don't know how to buy for you, you know everything now about what matters and the garment workers affected. I don't want to give you something you won't, appreciate. Now is the time to say, maybe give your values, maybe donate to an organization like Remake, or maybe a partner that you love within our community, and help us resource this movement and power this work together. Thank you so much, Aisha, for sharing. Yes, we don't take any corporate money from brands within the fashion industry, and it helps to move along conversations like this through your support. And with that, in case anyone wants to drop a commitment here, if you're feeling like you're ready to give, please drop in the chat saying, I would love to support Remake, or I'm going to donate by the end of this year. It means the world just to know that everyone has a peer and a buddy that's helping to move this forward. And separate from that, if anyone, maybe you're not in a place to give, that is totally okay. We always at Remake have all different ways of engaging in our movement, whether it's a campaign advocating for a bill that we're pushing, or whether it's a Give Your Values matching challenge to help resource and sustain this beautiful movement that fosters those campaigns winning. And so the other option here is, I'll just drop in the chat. This is a little Canva template that you can use if you want to tap your community to support. Maybe you're active on social media, you don't want to give right now, not a problem, but maybe you can bring in your friends, tag a couple friends, or invite someone in your family. And these are just, and I'll tell you as one final piece here, your personal experiences really Remake has done for me, the reasons that I'm grateful, the joy that it's brought me, as all of you have shared in this chat, from the Remake events to the ambassadors that you've met through this beautiful community throughout the 10 years we've existed so far. That is what gets people excited to share in supporting this movement. And so please share your stories with your loved ones. Please use these tools if you find them valuable, but we would love if anyone can support in any way to help us reach this 100K goal together. This movement doesn't happen without each of you taking part in any way that you can. And we're just so grateful for the opportunity to keep resourcing all of you and giving you the free tools and access to this movement together. So with that, I will close out, but thank you so much for sharing your joy. Thank you for powering this movement of joy and action and impact together. And thank you again to our incredible speakers. You are such a light in our movement, and we're so grateful to share this time with you.